There's a gene key, the 55th gene key, which is the shadow of victimization and the gift of freedom. And in this gene key, it talks about the new human, the human 2.0, and the mutation that's coming through our genetics, through our physicality. The energy centers that are existing within us and around us have been spinning in a complete counterclockwise direction, creating distortions within our being, within the planet. We are reorientating these centers, and the mutation has to come from the solar plexus because this is the last point of our lower chakras before we rise into the heart. And that would create a whole nother level of humanity, a humanity living from this space. What's up? Christopher August here on Superior Self. Super stoked to be here with Trey and ready to dive into this conversation today.
Christopher, my man, I'm so excited for this conversation. I found your app, Beats and Breath Work, or Breath, excuse me, Beats and Breath. I use it every day for sure. Um, and I wanted to get you on the show, one, to talk about your app, and then two, your journey, because I find it so interesting how you came to this work and this modality and how you're helping others throughout their journey. But I want to ask you, first off, right off the bat, um, how do you experience this reality?
Hmm. How do I experience this reality? It's a big question. And in this reality, are you referring to just everyday life, or are you referring to the realm of breath?
I would say everyday life.
Hmm. Just like anybody else, I'm fully human and fully divine, and trying to always embrace both of those parts. And sometimes the human takes over and I get myself caught up in fear or anxiety or lower states of frequency. And there's times I'm riding the highs and in beautiful states of love and joy and fulfillment and bliss, and always riding those waves. But what I found over the years, and something that's changed a lot, when you're doing the work, when I say the work, the inner work, and you're really focusing on yourself and your own awareness and growth and discovery and so forth, those waves, they're not so much at the top and then all the way at the bottom. You're kind of like surfing in the middle, and you learn how to surf the waves of life where they're not tsunamis that crush you anymore. Rather, you may dip into the lower states or the shadow states, and you learn to become okay with that. And that for me has been the journey. And I think for everybody is to learn to accept where you're at any given moment. And so for me, that has looked like really challenging dark nights of the soul that have taken me to the depths of my being, the depths of the underworld. And through that process, through the embracing, through the acceptance process, I'm now able to, when I reach sometimes these lower states, I can surf them, I can ride them, I can live with them, and then pop my head back out and continue the journey. So, that's where I'm at right now. And I would say that it's a continuous learning process. I'm always evolving.
So talk about your start, right? Like I think you're from New York, right? East Coast guy. And then your path kind of takes a twist there, and you end up in Africa for 2 years, which I love because I really want to get your perspective on the differences between the cultures and spirituality. But once you
Mhm.
go ahead and start there, man, like how did it start for you?
Yeah, man. Just as a brief synopsis here, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, in the suburbs of Buffalo. And, for anybody that hasn't been to Buffalo, they call it the city of good neighbors. It's an amazing city. Gets a bad rap because of the snow, and, hence why I'm currently living in Mexico. I definitely am not down to ride out those 6 to 8 month winters. But regardless, growing up there was really seemingly a wonderful childhood. Yeah, I had my challenges, of course, had my lows and my adversity, my struggles, with my parents and just in everyday life. But overall, I would say it was a positive experience. And, growing up though, I always felt a little bit different than most. I never really, um, although I had a lot of friends, had a lot of beautiful people around me, I always somewhat felt like an outsider. And I always felt like I thought a little bit different than everybody else. And as a result, I really carried this weight with me of feeling misunderstood, especially as I got into my teenage years and all of that. And, that really created this rebel in me where I didn't want to follow the status quo, although I did for a while because I didn't know anything else. But I knew that there was something more to life. I knew that I was destined for something greater, and not to put myself above anybody else. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just more so I didn't feel like I needed to follow what everybody else was doing. But of course, I got wrapped up in the matrix, and I did so for some time until my mid 20s, where at that time I was finishing my master's degree. I was working a corporate job. And in that corporate job, I was being asked to climb the ladder. I was being called upon the vice president, the president of this tech firm I was working at. And it was through that process I realized that I need to take a detour. This was not for me. So I finished my master's degree. I graduated close to the top of my class. But in reality, it was something that for me, it felt empty. There was an emptiness within me, and I knew I had to change my circumstances. And so from that point forward, I was actually had a beautiful synchronistic moment where I was driving home one day. It was a Tuesday afternoon during the summer from work, and I saw a billboard on the highway, and the billboard said, "Are you ready to answer the call?" And in the right-hand corner, it said, "Sponsored by the Peace Corps." And so I was like, "What's the Peace Corps? Am I ready to answer the call?" Yes. Like, this felt really resonant. So I went home, I Googled the Peace Corps. This is back in 2012. And I started doing all this research, finding Peace Corps volunteer stories. And for anybody listening that doesn't know what the Peace Corps is, essentially it's a grassroots American based organization that goes and volunteers in 80 different countries around the world for 2 years in the realms of health, agriculture, business, teaching English, and so forth. And so I ended up applying, going through a very rigorous application process over the course of a year, medical tests, all sorts of things, mental, emotional tests. And I got accepted. I got a letter in my email. It says, you've been accepted to Peace Corps Tanzania, Africa, and you have 7 days to decide. Let us know. And so I decided, and 5 months later, I was boarding a plane to Tanzania, Africa, where I lived in the villages. And when I say the villages, I'm talking about the real rural villages that there was no running water, no electricity, no modern amenities. I'm living there for 2 years of my life. And I'll just pause there. But that in itself was the turning point. It was the catalyst on my hero's journey.
Mm, I love that. Like, how did you adjust when you first got there?
Oh, the adjustment was steep. I really had a difficult time at first. So, as a Peace Corps volunteer, at least in Tanzania, again, I can't speak for all the countries because they're all different. But for the first 3 months, I was put into, I was living at a family's house, a family of 8 people. And I was with my cohort, the group of Americans that went over. We were in the same village together, learning the language, which was Swahili, getting accustomed to the culture and all of that, taking classes during the day, but then going to our host families, at night. And my host family, they were the sweetest, the kindest people, but didn't speak a lick of English, right? So you can imagine this white boy from Buffalo, New York, going to this small village, no clue what's going on. And I'm living in this small, little, tiny room. And it was a massive adjustment. But over time, I was really welcomed in a beautiful way. And so after those 3 months, you're assigned a village somewhere in the country. And so you go down to that village, and then that's where you live for the remaining 2 years. So all of us got split up in our cohort, and we're all assigned to these villages. Now there's not a Peace Corps volunteer for miles, for an hour and a
Wow.
half, 2 hours. So I'm isolated. I'm completely by myself in my own village then, where I'm living by myself in my own house. So again, there was two different experiences there, but both extremely transformative.
Would you consider yourself spiritual at that point in your life, or were you just still kind of like searching for yourself as like the individual or persona? Like, were you searching for something higher than yourself or greater or connecting with some type of, I guess, energy, you want to call that God or the cosmos or universe? Like, were you in that world yet, searching for that?
Yeah, definitely. There was definitely a higher calling, at the depth or degree in which I'm, at now, it was definitely different. But I was given in 2008, I was given the book Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss.
Mm.
And that was sort of this switch that turned on that confirmed a lot of what I already felt and believed. And from that point I started like really my search. And then going to Africa, it was like it was a key, for me to dive deeper because I had the space now. Of course, I was volunteering and I was doing projects in the village, but I had the space. I was surrounded by nature. I didn't have any distractions. I didn't have anything but to go within myself. I was doing a lot of reading and writing. And for me at that time, it was that place, that opportunity, that space for self discovery. And so, yes, there was a lot that came up during that experience because of the isolation factor.
Oh, did they help you cultivate that with just their cultural, belief systems or, like, their own spirituality? Like, what was the differences, between your village in Africa and then Western society? Like, I feel like they're more organic, connected to the land, more, like indigenous culture type, spirituality, but what was that like for you?
Yeah, most definitely connected to the land, and that was a really big distinguishing factor because they lived off the land. They didn't have a choice. They had to walk 2 miles to go to the closest river to get water. They had to grow their own food, right? There's no restaurant in the village. Although I did end up starting a small village eatery, but there was none of those things there available to them. So they relied on their own hands and their own labor to be able to eat, to be able to drink, to be able to, cultivate a life. And, beyond the nature aspect, which was very crucial, it was the community aspect.
Mm.
The what we see in Western society is such an individual weighted society in which people don't really take the time to care about others because they have their house, they have all of what they need inside of their own roof and living room and living quarters. And in Africa and Tanzania, they had to rely on each other. There was no way they would be able to survive without relying on each other. So it brought you back to this sort of primordial way of living where you're really deeply connected to your roots. And that's really was for me extremely eye-opening and extremely validating to this emptiness and anxiety I was feeling living in the Western world. So it really brought me back home to how we've always lived, except for since the Industrial Revolution, really.
It just feels right, right? Like, I feel
Yeah,
like that's the
exactly.
way like, the more you go to those spaces where you're just naturally connected to nature and the land and just the cosmos, like, the more right it feels. I know for myself, when I can go for a run and I can just connect with nature, like, that feels so organic. That feels like the truest, like, I don't know, state that we should be in, because a lot of information, a lot of, I have access to different parts of myself that I kinda lose or, shut off when I'm, like, in that Western mindset of, like, I have to, get this done. I have to be on this schedule. I have to be in control. So it's like those parts of myself I gain back when I can reconnect with nature. I'm just curious, like, with the tribe or the village that you were associated with, did they have any type of, like, spiritual routines? Like, what was their did they have a certain type of religion? Like, what were their beliefs?
It's interesting. It was really split down the middle. There was a group of Christian, the Christian faith, the Catholic faith is, specifically was very heavy indoctrinated within these villages. And that was one eye opening aspect that I saw. It's like how far Catholicism has traveled,
Wow.
even to the deepest of villages. And there was a Catholic church within the village. There was also practicing Muslims, and
Mm.
so there wasn't a divide per se. Like there was no infighting within the community. Everybody respected each other's beliefs. But there were, the outcasts per se, the medicine people of the village, which was very, for me, the most attractive force to be with, right? Is to learn and to see what types of herbs and plants these people worked with. And these, for me, I've never really identified with a specific dogma or religion. And so for me, as someone that was on this path of seeking, I really wanted to align with those that really were non-dualistic and
Mm.
non-dogmatic. And I found a couple medicine people that really were able to teach me a lot, especially as I learned the language and learned Swahili. And they were absolute catalysts in driving me closer to working with plants myself. And it was really that they were responsible for um, putting me in a position where I really wanted to dive deeper. And I actually went through an herbal certification right after I got back from that because of those people there.
That's so interesting. So, have you had different, shamanic journeys with plant medicines, like, around the world or, besides Africa? And if you have, like, what was the differences in the experiences, that you had there, versus the other ones?
So in Africa, I actually never worked with any psychogenic plants.
Mm,
There is, in Western Africa, up in the, West Coast and Ghana, and there they work with iboga, which is a very powerful plant ally, which I've never actually done. But I was working with more medicinal plants there. But my plant medicine journeys and working with psychogenic plants, I have traveled and, specifically in Ecuador and Peru and in South America, Mexico here where I live now. So yeah.
that's awesome, man. And so, like, do you encounter the same entities across cultures?
In the plants, you mean?
Yeah.
I think every plant has its own essence. It has its own consciousness. And I found, that working. So I've worked with specifically, I mean, I've worked with ayahuasca, I've worked with mushrooms, I've worked with cannabis. And these plant entities and allies, what I like to refer to them as, they do change based on. So, like for example, with ayahuasca, I've had 6 or 7 ayahuasca experiences now. Everyone's been completely different. The entity is still the same, but morphs and changes based on the circumstance, the conditions, the environment, the facilitator, all of that. So the
Mhm.
entity it morphs in many different ways, and what I've at least found with through my own experiences. But the actual essence and energy of that plant medicine is still rooted in the same way.
I love that, man. You also had I think I was listening to one of your episodes and you said that you had like a near death experience where you were white water rafting, I think, and kind of went under a rock, got trapped underneath the current, and we're really struggling to survive. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I was actually when I was living in Africa, this is back in 2014. I took a trip to Zambia, and when I was in Zambia, there's the Zambezi River, which is an iconic river, a beautiful, beautiful place to be. And when I was there, I just felt this call to be adventurous. During that trip, I not only whitewater raft, but I did a bungee swing, jumping off like a 400-foot cliff, swinging across the the river. All of what I probably wouldn't do now that I have a child, but um, it was definitely like in that moment of thrill seeking. So yeah, I was whitewater rafting, and in looking back in hindsight, it just really was not a safe situation. Going and we were rafting class 3, 4, and 5 rapids. And so I think it was the 12th or 13th rapid out of 26 rapids that we rafted that day. I fell out at the beginning of a class 5 rapid and got ejected from the boat. I was right in the front left part of the boat, and we hit a bump, and I somehow I was loose within the boat, and I popped out and fell into the water, and I had to ride the entire rapid down to the bottom.
Wow.
And there was a moment within that experience where, of course, the first part of it is like resistance. Is like, get me out of here, trying to force your way out. But water is an extremely strong force. And it was at that point when I was riding that rapid and trying to come up for air and then getting sucked back down, coming up for air, getting sucked back down, and just going through this process, which seemed like an eternity. I was swallowing all this water and I just lost the fight. I just lost my own battle and I just surrendered to the actual rapid. And I felt myself falling deeper and deeper and deeper. I ended up getting stuck. There's rock trapped me for, again, I don't know how much time it was. I ended up getting my leg out, but then still getting trapped in this rapid. And I remember, this, what people often say in a near death experience, right? You get closer to the light, like this tunnel of light starts approaching you. And I had felt in this really profound level of peace after I fully given up. And this light started to approach me. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I got yanked out of the rapid by this kayaker who saw me and put me onto his boat, and I was still somewhat unconscious. And then he started pumping on my chest and I started coughing up all of this water. And for me, it was really, again, another catalyst, another profound experience that really changed the way I looked at life. When you have an experience like that and you have a close call with death, you really begin to respect life on a whole new level. And that's really when I began to respect my breath on a whole new level. And that's when, for me, it was that moment like, wow, like I am so incredibly grateful for this breath, for this life, for everything that I have. And, I carry that experience with me as a reminder when I'm feeling like, yeah, I'm not really grateful or I'm complaining about something. I come back to that moment and know that it's such a gift to be alive.
Man, that's so beautiful. The white light, like, can you describe that a little bit? Like, hit on that because 'Cause I'm so fascinated with near-death experiences, and you said you had to surrender and you were allowing the current to take you or to the water to absorb you, and then the white light was coming. Like, was that, like did you see it with your eyes, or was it like, a feeling almost?
It was a full visual experience. Like, I not with my physical eyes, but with my third eye, where again I was in this space of surrender where I'm just completely laying back and the water's taking me and I'm essentially drowning at that point. I can no longer breathe. And all of a sudden, it was interesting because previous to this, I was obsessed with near death experiences and I was reading tons of books on them and all of that. And everybody talks about this white light. And I've never experienced it before until this moment. And it was like this, to put this into words is almost like
Sure.
impossible, but I'm going to do my best. It was the most profound light I've ever experienced in my entire life. You look at the sun, you see the daylight, it's an amazing light. But this is something different. It's this light that is warm, bathed in love, bathed in peace, and it like calls you. It's like it's dragging your soul towards it. And that's what I felt like, my soul leaving my body and being, it was like like gravity, like pulling my soul towards this light. And it was this sort of tunnel where this tunnel, it was like I was speeding down this tunnel. It got narrower and narrower and narrower. And then right at that moment, right as I was like almost like crossing this valve per se, I got yanked out of the water and then shook back
Oh,
into
wow. Wow.
into the
Wow.
body. So it was like, yeah, it's almost, I've been doing my best to find my words for it, but it was profound.
So it validated a lot of the stories that you heard previously to that, like the near deaths?
Everything,
Yeah.
everything. Like every single story I read, and I probably read hundreds, listened to hundreds of stories, read hundreds of stories. I was obsessed with the topic. And that was the moment where I was like, holy shit, I know what people are talking about. I know the feeling. And since then, since that moment, there hasn't been a deep-seated fear of death, right? It almost eliminated that fear and dissolved that fear, which is probably one of the most, common fears that humans have, is like what's on the other side. And I can't
Mhm.
say for sure what's on the other side, I never crossed the veil completely, but all I can say is what I was filled with, the feeling I was filled with was one of the best feelings in the entire. I mean, you can't quantify
Sure.
it.
You can't replicate it, right? Well, I mean,
Can't
maybe you can
replicate it.
replicate it. Can you
Maybe
connect
through
with
plant
that?
medicine. Yeah.
Can you connect with that when you think about it, that experience? Can you reconnect with that?
I can feel when I do, especially when I'm intentionally breathing and doing breath work, I can reconnect with the feeling, not so much the visual of it, but the feeling of it and the experience of that love, which is all encompassing, that peace. So oftentimes, my intention when I go in, especially if I'm going through a difficult time and I'm really having to find that center, that peace, I'll reconnect with that light and I just find that right in my heart space.
Well, I'm very curious now, like, Christopher, what's a difficult time for you? Like, describe that.
Mm.
What does that look like?
Well, I mean, we all have these challenges, as I've stated in the beginning, that we surf in life. And these challenges for me has moved through all aspects of my life, from my business, of having $1 in my bank account, having financial struggles, to having relational struggles and going through a deep grief process and a complete transformation of my most intimate relationships. All of these things have been really, really powerful teachers for me, especially in the relational space, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, that our relationships are our greatest mirrors and our greatest teachers. And when we can take an honest look at them, we can also take an honest look at ourselves and where we may not be living in integrity with ourselves, or we may not be fulfilling this relationship and living to its highest code or ideal. And for me, that has been by far the greatest teachers that I've experienced. And those difficulties, those challenges, those adversities that I've faced within the relationship space has absolutely shaped me and made me who I am today. And I'm so grateful for all of the beautiful teachers that have come onto my path to teach me.
Mm. I love that because people think when you're doing the work in spirituality, like you have a near death experience or something similar to that, or you do ayahuasca, or you have some type of journey or alter states of consciousness and doing breath work, like you get a taste of that other side, and that you're fully realized, that you have ascended. Like that's it, right? Like I don't think it's that at all. I feel like we're pushed back into this reality, this dense reality, and it's our job. Spirituality isn't this sunshine and rainbows. It's work. It's hard work. Like it is, it's going to take a lot of effort to continually do the work on oneself. Like I don't think we're ever fully realized. I think it is an ongoing hero's journey. To your point earlier, you touch heaven and then you fall back down to earth. But I think it is living in the middle, the balance. Finding balance between the two. I mean, we are human beings. I feel like we are the marriage between heaven and earth. We are um, the connection. We are to be of spirit and of earth, and to live the best possible life that we can while we're here and have the experience. But there's also a challenge too. Like, can you remember who you are in this reality? And the Matrix makes it tough because it's so real. It's like the programs since birth that you are basically scripted with throughout your life make it so tough to remember who you truly are. But it's like these things in our lives that take us down this journey, this path that we don't see coming, like your trip to Africa for 2 years, reconnecting with that part of yourself. For me, it was a winding road that ultimately led me to right here having this conversation with you. But I forget too, like having tough days. That's a part of the contract of why we're here. It's, can you remember who you are? Like, can you help others remember who they are? It's like, that's the process. It's this continual evolution of consciousness. And I say all that because I think through breath work and using your app, it has allowed me to to come up against that veil. Like something about breath work, something about going into these altered states of consciousness allows me to tap into the other side and bring something back with me, which I can't thank you enough for that hard work, because I know it takes a lot of work to put an app together. I don't know. I'm not like uh, my dog's getting ready to bark, by the way. Somebody came up to the front door. I'm not a coder or a tech developer, but all that work to put into something like this. One, I want to say thank you for that, and I want people to listening to try it out, because for me, again, it has allowed me to tap into the other side and bring it forth into this reality to go forward in those tough times, to like walk that line, to continuously walk that path, and to, I don't know, it's like a daily reminder of who we are. And I feel like, if people can tap into that a little bit more, like it wouldn't make this place, I mean, I would say it would probably help them out and guide them a little bit better. But I don't know that any of that makes sense, but it's just like it's like this ebb and flow with life, if that makes sense.
Totally, man. And I just want to honor you for doing this work and for being yourself and showing up. And it's we're students and we're teachers, right? Forever a student and also a teacher and a guide and facilitator. And for me, I always do my best to stay humble to this path, to this life, because life has this unpredictability about it, right? And it brings us into new levels within ourselves. And as we know, our external reality is literally just mirrored from our innermost state of consciousness at any given moment. And so by doing this work and by going within, using the power of breath, we can really begin to connect with that true self. And by connecting with that aspect of self to the best of our ability, each and every day or every week, every month, that in itself is the opportunity to remember and to
Mm,
reclaim those parts that maybe we've given away or we have lost, we've rejected, we've abandoned, and so forth. And so for me, when we speak to breath, it's the ultimate connector. It's the gateway to liberation, the gateway to our freedom. And the way in which we've co-created this and co-constructed this in our sessions and journeys that we offer is really the core intention for me, which maybe is different than some of the other breathwork practices out there. No matter what the theme is of the session, it's to reconnect with your soul. And I want people to touch those parts of themselves. And for me, when I'm facilitating this, when I'm guiding these practices, I'm being guided myself to reconnect with those parts, because we, right now, especially at this time, we are living in probably the most pivotal time on planet Earth. We are approaching and probably already at the 11th hour right now. And the time is ticking, and we really need powerful tools and practices to center ourselves, to keep ourselves grounded amongst the chaos that is happening on this planet right now. And we need to be anchors for those that maybe don't have the tools, don't have the skills or the knowledge right now to be able to navigate these times. And so having someone like yourself, and all of the other people out there that are doing this work, that is truly, in my opinion, the most important work on this planet right now. Because as we all do this together, we're all elevating the world, one breath at a
mhm,
time.
mhm. Where do you think we're headed? You say 11th hour, right? Like, and just in your perspective, like as far as humanity and society, like where do you think we're headed towards?
It's interesting. I've had um, a lot of visions, a lot of insights. I've reflected on this quite a bit, and I ultimately am optimistic. I see a beautiful future ahead for humanity, and at least the reality and the earth that I'm choosing to live on. However, I do foresee in the coming months and the coming years another big shadow reveal. And when I say shadow reveal, I'm saying the darkness that has been hidden beneath the surface that really needs to be exposed by the light. And the only way in which we heal and raise the collective consciousness of this world is by looking at our own individual and collective shadows that have been playing out for a very long time. And it is those shadows that are the gateways, they are the catalyst to our gifts and to us living in a higher frequency. Now, I do believe that we are going to see another massive upheaval of certain systems and structures. I do feel that the control powers that be at this moment are not going to let go that easily. And there is going to be some very extreme things that are going to be happening. But this is not to induce fear. It's more to empower ourselves that we can, again, like I mentioned, do our best to stay centered and anchored within our core, within ourselves during this time. But I will say that it's almost necessary for the shadows to come to the surface, because we can't just move on and create a new paradigm without doing this deep work. And that's what a lot of the new age fake spirituality bullshit movement has talked about, is like, oh, we need, it's all light and love and sunshine and rainbows, as you said before, but it's not, like, we live in this dualistic nature on this earth, and we need to embrace both sides. And when we can truly embrace the darkness as a teacher, we can really move forward in a completely new way. So I do foresee beautiful things coming, but I do, believe that before that there is going to be some destruction happening.
So are these visions during your sessions in breathwork?
I have had a lot of prophetic dreams as well as prophetic experiences, plant medicine and non-plant medicine. I've done dark room experiences, breath work, all of these things where I've received different visions, different things that have been playing out in the collective consciousness that again, that's just that I don't want anybody to take
Sure.
my opinion or my word to say like this is exactly what's going to happen. It's just what I've perceived, and I
Can
can't
you
say if
just
I'm
talk
right or
through your
wrong.
experience? Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like for you though, your subjective experience, like what have you
Yeah.
seen, like a vision for you that has come to pass that validated that experience and future experiences in those states?
So this year specifically, at the end of this year, in the fall, going into the winter time, I do feel and I have perceived another major event happening. I can't say exactly what it is, but I have seen some really deep levels of control happening again, similar to what we may have seen in 2020, but on another level. Like I foresee something bigger this time, and perhaps carrying forth for a little while. Um, I can't say for sure if there's another lockdown or restrictions or anything like that, but I do see a major event happening. I see a pivotal turning point as well. And this has been talked about. I've seen this in other theories of what people have said that I've followed after reading or perceiving and having these visions, is 2027 being a really big turning point.
Mhm.
And this turning point, I don't see, I'd say for the next decade, we're going to see massive changes. And I'm saying politically, economically, on every single level. Like every single system is going to have to come into question and will come into question so that we can build anew. But there will be a strong force of domination trying to create more levels of control for humans on Earth. But I do see 2027 being a pivotal awakening year. And it's really interesting because in the gene keys, which is something that I've been studying for the past 7 years, and I facilitate groups and readings and all of that. There's a gene key, the 55th gene key, which is the shadow of victimization and the gift of freedom. And in this gene key, it talks about the new human, the human 2.0, and the mutation that's coming through our genetics, through our physicality. And Richard Rudd, the founder of the gene keys, I've studied under him, I've learned from him. And what he talks about and what he shares is that through, cataclysm, through sort of massive change and structures dissolving, we inherently have to evolve, right? Those are like the moments where we have to adapt and evolve. And this is the mutation through the solar plexus, which is an interesting thing to consider and contemplate. And I know this is getting maybe a little bit more esoteric now, but I'll go a little bit deeper into this. So the solar plexus is what we know is, right, this power center where our identity is held, where our ego is held, and our willpower. It's a very powerful center. And our centers, our energetic centers, individually, collectively, and planetarily, because the planet has energy centers as well, have all been distorted um, through different means. And the energy centers that are existing within us and around us have been spinning in a complete counterclockwise direction, creating distortions within our being, within the planet. And what we're beginning to do through this process of moving out of the state of victimization into what the Gene Keys calls state of freedom, we are reorientating these centers. And the mutation has to come from the solar plexus, because this is the last point of our lower chakras before we rise into the heart. And that would create a whole nother level of humanity, a humanity living from this space and from a completely harmonized lower centers, where really we've been completely programmed, conditioned, and imprinted, stuck, indoctrinated in a place of fear, in a place of survival, where we don't know what it's like to thrive. We don't know what it's like to live in a harmonious, balanced, coherent way. And so there's these three rhythms. It's funny enough, I didn't mean to do this, but my Gene Keys book is next to me. So I'm going to actually share a few things here, because the 55th Gene Key talks about this new awakening that's happening and the rhythms of life. And the 2027, which I spoke about before, is called the Rhythmic Symphony. And so, as we know, in 2012, um, the Mayan calendar, right? There was an ending of the Mayan calendar, and everybody thought there was going to be this cataclysm, apocalyptic event that happened, but it was just an ending of a cycle and the start of a new cycle. And this was the mark of when humanity would begin to really awaken. And that doesn't mean that at that moment there's going to be one profound event and everybody awakens. It's a process that happens over the coming years. And that cycle was called the melodic resonance. And so now we're moving into 2027 which is called the rhythmic symphony. And this is going to be the last of the three cycles, which the first one started in 1987. Then we had 2012. Now we have 2027. So, what is beginning to happen at this point? It doesn't mean one major event, but there's a turning point that happens, and we begin to switch on different codes within our DNA. And this will gradually happen over the next 20, 40, 50 year, 100 years from now. So, there's a lot of theories out there. Again, I've seen different things. The Gene Keys talks about it directly. Something's happening. No,
Mm,
undoubtedly, something's
sure.
happening, and we're in for a ride.
Absolutely, man. I'm just really curious about how we can activate our cellular structures when we go into different states of consciousness. When we use breath work, when we use plant medicine, how do we take that wisdom, that knowledge, that remembering, and then like bring it back and integrate it into the body to activate those hidden layers or those hidden cellular structures to be the human 2.0? Like, how do you do it? What is your protocols for that?
So, what I've perceived directly, and I can share an experience if you'd like me to, but and this kind of goes with the visions that I was alluding to before. Uh, what I've been tapping into, which I actually just recently shared in detail on another podcast, is around the metaphysics of breathing. And I finally got the code that I needed to unlock what I was seeing, and to unlock it on a scientific level, because I can talk all day about my visions. But I had a really profound experience in a dark room 2 years ago. I did a 5-day dark room retreat. And as I was in there, I slept for the first couple days because your melatonin levels are just like super high and you're just very tired. You're in complete blackness, can't hear anything. It's complete, like, submerged in the darkness. And after I got over the ego stuff of wanting to leave and get out and all of that, I started to surrender to the experience and went in to do breath work. And as I was breathing, I began to have very, very profound third eye visions where I was seeing the light travel up and down my spinal column, and the light was being carried within the fluid, which, after looking into it, it's the cerebral spinal fluid that sits at the base of your spine and that moves up into your brain. And this cerebral spinal fluid, it's been talked about in different texts throughout the centuries, and also is responsible for kundalini rising, right? So kundalini, what has been drawn and referred to as the snake that sits at the root of your at your root chakra, is coiled and starts to rise up. And the breath is the stimulant, it's the activator, it's the awakener of this energy. It carries the spinal fluid from the root to the brain, and when it reaches the brain and it's activated, these frequencies that are encoded within this fluid, because we know water is the ultimate conductor and holds memory, it activates the third ventricle and then starts to open the pineal gland. And this was recently confirmed by the research of Dr. Mauro Zapatera, who I connected with, who was doing research at Harvard through his dissertation on CSF, cerebral spinal fluid. And to kind of circle back to your question about activating these codes within us, I work profoundly with the gene keys and breath work together. And the reason I do so is because the gene keys is a system that talks about, you combine your personal astrology with the Chinese I Ching, the 64 archetypes. You have these imprints within your profile you chose pre-birth coming to this planet. And these imprints contain three frequency bands: a shadow, a gift, and a siddhi, which is Siddhi, a Sanskrit term for the highest potential of whatever the archetype is. And you begin, as you contemplate, and contemplation is through patience, through gentleness, reading through these keys, and then through the power of your breath, which is the ultimate unlock. When you breathe intentionally and consciously, you begin to activate these codes. And that's when you turn on higher states of consciousness and have greater realization. So there's something here, and I've been working a lot deeper with these two tools and modalities together, because I'm seeing, even through my groups, through myself and through others I'm working with, how profound this truly is.
Yeah, there's something to water. I mean, we're what, 60 to 70% water anyway, and holds
Yep.
memory. So a lot of our environments influence us, right? Like the Dr. Emoto studies of how, a positive, negative affirmation, how that has the effects on water. Like I'm really getting into like health and like what I put into into my body. How do I maintain a higher frequency vessel so that when I go into these states of consciousness, like I can go and tap into that and bring that and have more memory with me into the body to activate the cellular structure in my, in the body. So that way I can be the human 2.0. I think it's, and then when you're tapping into that, like, I feel like you go into an environment like that is more dense and you automatically make a change, like at the quantum level, if that makes sense. Like, have you ever experienced that? Like, have you just, coming out of your retreat or having intense breathwork sessions, gone into different locations that aren't maybe accepting of these types of modalities and automatically seeing a difference in your reality?
100%. And before I touch on that, I just want to share another person that I have been very influenced by. Her work's amazing. If you haven't heard of her, her name's Veda Austin. And she took Dr. Emoto's work and just like went to the complete next level. And I interviewed her for 3 hours on a podcast, and like had the most profound, I think I asked three questions, just let her talk the whole time. And what she shared with me was unbelievable. And I'm going to share actually one experience because it relates to what we're talking to, and I think will help to, maybe at the least get people curious about what we're saying here. So she's into freezing water. So she'll, state an intention or a word, freeze that, and then it will show itself, right? Like that word or whatever she says, like a tree, it will show itself frozen as a tree in water, right? So it shows that water is listening, right? Like water holds memory. It's a conductor, it's a powerful force. So she was doing this with dreams, and she would put it next to a petri dish next to her bed, and she would have she'd wake up the next day, freeze that petri dish, and she would see her dreams manifest within the water. That was the first crazy experience. I'm like, holy shit, okay, this is wild. So the water's recording her dreams. Then she decided to do this experiment where she said, told the water, show me ayahuasca. So she froze the water, it showed a vine and a leaf. And her husband ate the ice cube and went on a mini profound psychedelic experience from eating that
Wow.
and I was like, okay, that's when I was like, okay, we need to go deeper here because there's something to this. And this is where we get then into the fourth phase of water. And there's so much here. Again, I'm not a water expert, but that's why I said refer to Veda Austin. So I just wanted to mention that because I know there will be people that will be interested in hearing that or listening to her work.
Oh,
So to circle
100%.
back to your original question, can you repeat that one more time just so I
Yeah,
remember?
no, you're good. Like, I think I like to see the effects of what I'm doing in reality, right? And so when I go into a dense area or to a place where it may not be of, individuals that I'm having conversation with, like you, or, right now, but I'm going into the real world and I'm having conversations with people. I have to communicate, still live in this reality. But have you ever like come out of like the darkness retreat or breath work sessions or intensives or meditation and just you feel that change inside of you? How has that shown you or reflected to you in everyday reality?
Mm. Well, I mean, first off, again, I like to stay as grounded as possible. I've had very prophetic and profound experiences throughout my journey. And, sometimes it's hard to integrate back into everyday reality. If I'm being honest, like it's hard to relate to people and to have small talk and to bullshit and all of these things. For me, that I definitely find that difficult at times. But, I would say like one of my strengths is being adaptable and compassionate and understanding of where other people are at. And, for me, how I integrate all of what I experience, not only having these conversations, which I deeply appreciate, but also to be able to like take someone that maybe has never been exposed to this work before, never been exposed to what even breath work is or anything we're talking about here. And a lot of times, people are at first very skeptical of things. And that's people's nature because of the reality we live in. And they don't want to trust anything. And so, what I like to do is take my experiences and ground them in and said, hey, okay, what is breath work? And I've did this with a Uber driver once. He's asking me what I did. I was traveling, doing an event in LA. He's like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I do breath work. He's like, oh, I've never heard of that. What is that? Sounds crazy. And I'm like, no, just it's like meditation and you're just using your breath and just consciously breathing. We were stopped at a red light. I said, here, try this. Take 1 minute and take 5 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, and do this for just a minute. And just that alone, he was like, oh my God, like I feel so much more relaxed, so much more grounded. Like, what is this? And I'm like, this is your breath. This is something that you have access to every single day, but nobody really pays attention to it. So just those little examples like that, I think help people to really understand, what we're talking about here and all of that. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny, him being a taxi driver or an Uber driver in LA, and that's weird to him. I feel like I've been to LA a couple times and I've seen some weird shit. But I love LA. It's like the energy out there is so like I don't know. It's like so different than the East Coast. I mean, you're from New York, and
for
it's
sure.
it's definitely different. That's why I feel like it's so important to have these conversations. And like me being on the East Coast, like it can be hard talking about some of this stuff to people because they look at you like, "What are you talking about?" Like next year, I want to do an event and it's like it's surrounding consciousness, bringing in some healers, maybe some channelers, maybe some psychologists or whatever. But I want to talk about consciousness, like everyone's subjective experience and how they interpret what we're here, our purpose, right? Like, to your point about, your experience is your experience, and you don't want to mislead anybody thinking that you know the truth. I feel like everyone's truth is their truth, and there's like many paths up the mountain, and it's like just finding your groove. It's like for me, the path, and it's I'm always going to be a seeker. Like it's just my nature. And I think there's so much joy in that because it's like when I think I know, then I realize I just have no clue, man. Like I can do all these different things, like I could do the meditations, the breath work. I haven't done psychedelics, but like if I ever get to that point where I do that, it's still going to be a version of whatever this place is. It's not going to be the full slice. I don't think we'll ever have the capacity to fully understand what the cosmos is. I think that's like the thing. I mean, it's like find your truth and just do whatever that is the best that you can. But again, it's like we're not forcing this on anybody, and I think that's where a lot of the trauma is. You know what I mean? With the indoctrination growing up, and from my past experiences, like this is the truth. You have to be saved. You have to do this. You have to abide by these laws in order to seek heaven or get into heaven. And I find like heaven for me is a state of being now. Like if I can get into a place of like mental calmness now and just experience this moment in its pure form of like, wow, like I'm really alive right now. Like I'm really, before I started doing your app, like I really took the breath for granted. Like I didn't realize how shallow I was breathing. And it's allowed me to breathe deeper and to be in the moment more and to like look at my thoughts more objectively instead of like thinking that they are me, and
Mm.
to appreciate just taking up space. Like I am taking up space with you having a conversation on a platform right now. We're on a planet going around the sun, and it's like, wow, like just take that in for a minute. Like, what is this? And I think that's the fun. It's the mystery, if any of that makes sense.
100%, man. Yeah, and I appreciate the way you shared that. And I think it's like I said earlier, I think one of the most important really keys to living is staying humble and honest. Like we don't know, and to think that we do, and to be so naive to think that we have all the answers, like that's not a great place to live life. And when we and I've seen people from that approach, from that guru standpoint of I know everything. And for me that's just a big turn off. Like I don't care what you do, who you are, like what experiences you've had. Those experiences have added up to help you become the person you are. But at the same time, like to really stay grounded and humble, like that's the true path. And I personally strive to lead myself and others from that place, because it's more of an empowering place than of anybody standing on a pedestal and saying they know it all. Like
Sure.
I don't
It's like
subscribe to
more
that.
authentic, right? Like people can connect
For
with you
sure.
more because like they're all on the same path. They're just trying to find their way. And to your point, like that's the biggest turnoff for me. It's like you have to do this. Like you have to abide by this. You have to do this ritual. It's like, man, just figure it out. Like just try it. If you don't like it, just scrap it
Yep.
and move on to the next thing. But what I like about your app for sure, and I'm not being paid to say this. I love the music in it. I love I can get relaxed, and there's different time frames set. So like if you want to do a short breath work session, like 9 minutes, I do the heal part. I can do that. If I want to go longer, I can do that as well. But it allows me to connect early on in the morning, so that way I can bring it with me for the rest of the day. Um, this has been amazing. Christopher, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I really feel like we can go down some rabbit holes, and maybe we can do that in the future. Um, but for sure, how can people connect with you? How can they download the app?
Yeah, brother. Thank you so much for the time and space. And I really enjoy your presence and your conversation. It really, it really flows beautifully. And thank you for what you're doing to share information and wisdom with people. It definitely is much needed in this world. So appreciate you for that. And yeah, for anybody that wants to dive deeper and go into breath work, and, for me, at the end of the day, one of the most important things is simplicity. We live in a complex world. We live in a place where there's so much information. We're being bombarded all the time. Try this, do this, whatever it is. And oftentimes that becomes confusing. But what I like to do is bring things back to simplicity. And simplicity means breathing, because and there's fireworks here. I like it on the background.
Listen to this. Listen
how
to this.
how timely. For me, breathing is the most profound thing we can do, and the most transformative and healing thing we can do. And we take 20,000 plus breaths a day, and yet we rarely ever pay attention to one of those breaths. So when you just bring some level, small percentage of conscious awareness to that, your life can begin to change so incredibly fast, and it's so effective in so many ways. And I can share so many reasons why to consciously breathe. But if you guys want to try it out, you can go to beatsandbreath.com, or you just go to the App Store. You can, on iOS and Android, download the app. And we really like to give a lot of value up front. Like, I'm all about value. It's like, hey, download the app. You get it for free right away to download, and you get a free 7-day breathwork challenge that you can go through, try it out yourself. And if you like it, we have an entire library. And every week we're striving to release new tracks. I got a couple coming out this week. And yeah, we're just always bringing more to the table and really bringing this technology to the next level, which is your breath and the power of sound. So
Yeah,
Beats and Breath. And then if anybody wants to connect with me personally, I have my own website, ChristopherAugust.co, on there, or on Instagram at Christopher_August.
it's awesome, man. And lastly, I got to ask you before I forget. I don't.
Sure, bro.
Maybe I asked you this or not. Like, what's the similarities between the altered states of consciousness when you're deep in the breath work, and then like how is it related to, or if similar or dissimilar to psychedelics states? You know what I mean? Like, do you
Mm.
find yourself in similar territory when you're doing either?
Yeah, I would say they're very similar in many ways. It depends on the plant medicine we're talking about, but I would say that overall, like, on a deep breathwork journey, you can reach the same dimensions, same states of consciousness that you can with plants, assisted by plants. But I don't subscribe to either or. Like, plant medicine is not necessary. Like, if you feel called to it, beautiful. But breath alone can help you to reach higher states. And I found that, I've experienced very similar things on plant medicine as I've found in breath work. So both are
Sure.
both are wonderful in my opinion.
What about like manifesting or like quantum jumping? Have you heard of that before? Like, can you get to
Oh,
that state?
yeah. How much time you got? Yeah, I mean, if you want me to touch on that quickly before we
Yeah.
jump.
Well, I know we're a little bit over, and I apologize for
I'm
that,
fine
but
with it.
like, yeah,
No, no, no,
yeah,
no. We're good. I got time. So I would say that breath work is one of the ultimate tools for manifesting that is often underlooked. And now I'm going to explain this in a very user friendly way, a one-on-one way. So, manifestation, what is it? Right? We're always manifesting. We're always creating our reality. We are the creators of our reality. And that's first taking responsibility for our creations. That's number one. Number two, are we manifesting consciously or unconsciously? Most of us are manifesting unconsciously. We're wondering why things are happening to us, what's going on in our lives, and we're playing victim to all of that. But like I said in the first part, when you take responsibility for your creations, you step into your power. And from that point, you can be conscious about your creations. And your creations come from thought, from belief, from feeling, and of course, from action. And so all of that mixed together, and of course, our emotions, that creates the cosmic soup to manifest whatever it is we desire. And sometimes what we desire is not for our highest good, so it may not come into physical reality. However, when we align our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings, and our actions together and our emotional states, we can begin to really consciously create a reality that is aligned with our higher will and higher purpose. And how the breath plays into this is that the breath is a tool, it's a modality for shifting frequencies. We all are energetic beings. And when we are operating in lower vibrational states, such as fear, shame, guilt, uh, anger, sadness, whatever it is, I don't want to deem those as bad. It's just they're lower states of emotions. We are kind of caught up and not able to really raise ourselves up. And the breath is the way to do that. When we shift frequencies, we can shift our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings through the power of breath. We can raise into higher states. And it's in those states when, especially when we're in the in between state, in the breath retention phases, we can call forth our deepest intentions, visualize them, feel them, experience them. And by doing that over and over and over again, we are training ourselves as the creators to create the reality we desire. So the breath is one of the most powerful and potent modalities to manifest what it is you want.
Mm, wow. Yeah. Like, how often would you have to do that for someone who wants to manifest things? Like, when you manifested, maybe this role as co-creator of this app, like, how long
Uh-huh.
did it take you to do that?
Well, for me personally, I don't, it's all about, I had to plug my computer in.
Okay.
It's all about it's all about doing what I just shared, but also surrender and letting go to the process and trusting that it's going to happen. That's the second part of this, which I didn't mention before, is that yes, it's visualizing, yes, it's feeling, yes, it's shifting your frequency and your energy, but then it's like letting go and knowing that it's done, right? It's like the knowingness, the embodiment that whatever you're putting out there, if it's in the highest good, it's done. So, for example, I'll give you two examples. One was the creation of beats and breath in general. I was facilitating breath work at different circles. And it was at this time in 2020 when I met my business partner, Johnny Buffalo, who makes all the music for Beats and Breath. I had no clue who he was before. All I held was this vision for 3 months that I needed someone to help me make this breath work that I had already dialed in within myself, but I didn't have the musical capabilities to do this. I needed a musician. So I facilitated a breathwork journey at this men's circle, and this guy came up to me after and says, "Wow, that was a profound experience. I just had this awakening experience 2 days ago. I got called to come back to Buffalo. I didn't know why. I was in New York City and I came to this." And he said, "I just want to ask you, who makes your music?" And I said, "No one. I've been looking for someone." He's like, "Well, maybe that's me." And we started creating right away. Right. So, like, that was one manifestation. And then the app, right? We needed money, we needed an investor. And so I was visualizing that. And 5 months into that journey, I was doing one of my Breathe with Cannabis events that I do. And in that event, he had a profound experience, contacted me after. We got together. He's like, "Okay, I want to invest in you guys and the app and everything you have." He's like, "This is profound work." And so it's just like trusting that it's already done, knowing that it's
Mm,
already there.
what are you manifesting now? What's next?
Man, like, my intentions are very clear and they're set, and right now I'm really just in this space where I'm just like fully in. I'm not really striving for anything, like, I'm one thing that I am doing right now. I am writing a book on breath. And that for me, like, I do want to see that book do very well and to be internationally recognized and get into as many hands as possible. And that's already, the seed is planted. So I'm just going to see what happens.
Trust, right? Surrender and trust.
Yeah, man.
Christopher, my man, dude, I could talk to you for days. Yeah, what's on your heart that you want to share with people?
I just want to really have a heart to heart and just share with anybody listening to this right now. Like, if you're struggling, if you're suffering, if you're in a place where, things might not seemingly be going your way and you're having a really difficult time in life, whether that's relationally, financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, wherever you're at, just really sinking into a place within yourself and just breathing, taking a few deep breaths, centering yourself, coming back home to your heart, and just tuning in with all of what's present and alive, and just knowing deep down that no matter where you're at, if you're in the bottom, if you're in the hole, that there is another day. There is an availability at this moment to rise up, and that where you're at right now is exactly where you need to be. And those challenges you're faced with, those things that you're struggling with, is absolutely perfect. Even if it doesn't seem like that, it's absolutely perfect for where you're at right now. And knowing that beyond this is a greater version of yourself, and that you and you alone can begin to pull yourself out of this. And it is through your breath, it is through the sacred act of the inhale and the exhale, of just tuning in with yourself and feeling into all of what you can be grateful for right now, is the way you can return back to that place of fulfillment, to that place of wholeness, to that place of prosperity, to that place of purpose and meaning, whatever it is. It's there and available for you right now. And all you have to do is breathe.
That sounded like a channeled message there. Christopher, my man, thank you so much for taking the time. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, brother.